program home. Yeah, you got voted off the island.
Stay up here.
Sure. Yeah. Be a big scratch in it. Only for big scratches, little ones don't. Oh, those are their money. They're all my shopper. Only for big scratches. I know the manager. Here, I'm just gonna get glass. Dust from working on the saws. Yeah. Who gets spare dogs? Here we go. You there? You call me? Yep. Absolutely. Sure. Thanks. You still going tomorrow? Well, make it easy. Well, you meet 301, 228 at the books and name there, auto parts store there, and miles in there. Yeah. No. Come down 228 to dump right in 301, right? Like books and name there. Auto parts, and all over. Pick a spot on 301 that I know. That way I have to try to find your place in the car.
John,
Yes.
did you try the Einkorn?
It's at my parents' place getting ground right now. I haven't been home since.
Yeah.
Seriously?
Yep. Yeah.
I was at home all weekend.
Okay.
So. Got 2 more weeks.
Eat some pancakes.
Got 2 more weeks. I'm supposed to be in Nevada next week. And California the week after.
Good deal.
I'm done.
Well, yeah, how you like?
Yeah.
Checking it the other
Thank
day.
you very much for it. I really appreciate it. Are you selling seed?
And, I think Gabriel. Do you have like a spell deal around there or anything like that? That's,
Does it need to be de-hulled
yeah,
to plant?
not the plan.
Right. We've got, we have a really big de-hauling facility. We don't have a de-hauler on our own. Or are you saying that we?
Yeah,
Oh, you mean if we
if
grow
it's
it?
within like, yeah,
Oh, right.
you're not trucking it out.
No, we have, well, down in Holmes County, there's, Stutzman who does all spell pumping and everything else.
Oh,
He has a
okay.
huge de-hauler. They run truckload every couple of days, something like that, 20 tons. Yeah, some pretty impressive stuff going on. They can't find that spell there. They are, he has his own de-hauler. They're de-hauling organic spell. And then I think they sell spell. They sell spell flour, but then they also make pump spell.
Mhm.
And they sell that stuff. I don't even know how much they sell. Well, let's just put it this way: they sell a lot of it.
I see.
They sell a lot of it.
Yeah. It's cool if you have that, because that's, I mean, we have small valley milling down there. So you just take it in there, 'cause once you're big enough, you can start to get started in that.
Yeah.
And I think there's smaller stuff out there, but it's not quite as interesting as some of them.
Right.
Like, you get in there and basically it gives you a whole system, and at the end you have a 50-pound bag and a vacuum seal, and you're done. And it's clean. I mean, you have a little bit of stuff here, but you run it through a grinder.
Yeah.
I was out checking it the other day. It's coming now. It's a little, I don't know, kind of concerned. I planted a tree in this year. Last year I did it too thick. I think I had some logging and stuff. I'm gonna try to hit it a little more. I hit it maybe twice last year.
No, you should be able to have a substantial influence on test weight, protein content, and all that. They should never launch. Should never launch.
Cool. Well,
I'll do that. Thank you.
What is the latest of this testes bei der Stadt ist? Die in der Gare immerhin schon schätzt du das so Smartphone zu testen können.
The unit is in Schwarzwald ist gerade now gewonnen a lawsuit since we haven't affected legal rights to.
Sie wollen es nicht existen.
Well, nee, let's see about this eight.
Oh, dat is net een probleem pas op de markt weer.
So,
Kook zou alweer nog komen zo.
so it's such a question for the mon.
Was hebben we met de organic normal en die last week? Tot when it issues.
In Europe right now, this sugar can demonstration organic and conventional. This is the even devout organic certified set because the conventional causes down with so many pesticides used. Sugar can difference. So you couldn't guess it's just all can difference in price. And so give it 7 to 10 years, I think we're going to be in the same spot in the U.S.
So that's why the future fire pass.
Oh yeah, I'd say go organic now. Be organic now. Get the organic premium, but don't expect it to last forever. Good.
No. I was just.
You said to be back here in 45 minutes, and it's now an hour.
I know, but people aren't in, so why am I?
Well, you're
Just get
supposed to go get the whip or the whistle or the steel-toed boot.
You
or
know,
all three.
There's one problem. I don't want to be always driving. I don't want to be always hammering it up. I'm just going to do so much and then I'm going to shut up.
Well, I didn't have to do it. It's not my place.
So you think I should be doing
No, I don't think you should be doing it. I think John should be doing it, or Dave, or Sam, or someone. What's that?
John, it's your turn to go over. Tell them it's time.
You
Tell them it's
haven't
1 o'clock.
had a turn yet. Go up there and start
Well, do you know what? I can just go up there and start talking.
You know what you can do? You go up there, you're selling a 1 hour free consultation with John Kemp on the phone. You get people in here fast. Oh yeah? Who's doing it? I think John Kemp. Oh, you're big enough check. I'll think about it.
Yeah, those guys are gonna have about us needing planning.
One guy said, I'll put 4,000 in.
Want to drop in the bucket or how?
You need another 3 zeros. 500 farmers. Yeah, we've only got 50 farmers here. That's the problem.
So,
Are you gonna push 2,000? Past Sam, 200. How is it? You run it past Sam. That's for what we are.
so Owen, I just sent you a couple emails. I'm gonna send you another one right now.
What do you have in mind? We have in mind there's Cobalt rechanging that. I
just got 2 research articles sent to me that say that when you have higher levels of cobalt, phosphorus absorption goes up like 5%.
Wow, that sounds interesting.
Because I was wanting to ask you about that.
That's what we need. I was gonna say, why don't you somehow cover what they're doing with their phosphorus?
I mean, that's very
They have more positive excess.
Yeah, but that's because they put on compost and manure rate of 50 tons per acre once.
And they get it for crop, we'll do that too, but.
No, you don't put on 50 tons per
Yeah,
acre.
our gardens are all high, they said.
Yeah, but you also have limestone-based soils with a lot of calcium in that's tying up the phosphorus.
Or, so you get it settled at the meeting, tell me what we're doing, that's all that.
Yeah.
The office hard to man, as long as he knows it's the one not forward. But yeah, we can, we can hear what you have to say. I stand for trusting the call. I stand for the totally full truck. Okay. Truck I'm saying. You're gonna be totally full.
Is there any way to get information with scientists to lots of graphs?
No, we can't. No, it's doing something.
He died 25 years ago. Well, he co-authored the book Eco Farm.
What are you saying? 13 acres. You go back to 10
Acres,
acres.
yes,
We'll be taking off. That was 3,000. I was wondering, John, 10,000 pounds sap test. It doesn't make sense all the way out. It's like that size, but it's.
No, I don't think it will make a big difference because there's not really any oxidation going on. Yeah, there isn't really a lot of that. That's the only thing you can do. I mean, the entire switch from proteins to ammonium is a process of proteolysis that happens inside the leaf. Because I just already squeeze all the air out. Shut the bag is tight. The 10 minutes it'll fill up and fill up. I noticed that respiration. It's still breathing. Yeah, it's still respiring. It'll say you're saying the oxygen you have it.
I was pretty sure that's what happened. You could probably live longer on this. Should be pretty much pure oxygen.
Yeah, it should be.
I did notice that they couldn't tell that by the time we're into it.
I figured it's a cheap bag because we get back all the time.
No, that's not. Oh, you like using it back?
No, on meats. We use good bags because it's cheap and you got them set for every year. You'll get air.
They're not totally cut. Plastic is something.
You have to do a good seal.
So
Just came up with 2 research papers.
Testing. All right, if you can find your seats, we'll want to get started here.
They're saying that when they get a couple levels higher, there was one study, one white paper on tomatoes, one on fava beans, and they get it up to 7.5 parts per million. They were talking about
That could help. But we can't do an over-application. Have you decided to finish your theory on why phosphorus and how phosphorus mobility work? You know, it doesn't work quite like that.
I haven't worked.
I was thinking radiographic of radioactive phosphorus might tell us something. Put it on a whole leaf, right? Put it on top and the roots. So that was the source. In between, it also did some distributed early. But if you put it on a new leaf that is not exporting, suppose it will stay. My thinking, it moves in the flow, but it has no real control over it, maybe, or something. That only one ship would ship it if it gets it.
What stage was the plant at, and where was the oxid dominance? Was the oxid dominance in the seed or in the nuclear?
It was in the new growth. It was strictly vegetative. I'm thinking maybe it's just all grown with no particular control. Which would explain sometimes way high phosphorus in new growth.
There's another interesting aspect. We talk about phosphorus, but it doesn't exist.
Okay, I'll get started.
It's various oxides.
So to get started here, I wanted to share a little bit of my growing up years. I don't know how about growing up, because some of you might disagree, but
I still haven't grown up yet.
I don't think so. So I grew up on a dairy farm, and when I was 10, my dad sold the cows, and we rented out the land. And then at age 14, I started farming some of the land myself with my dad. And I guess at age 17, 4 years ago, I needed a new challenge. And so I just knew I never thought I wanted to grow produce when I was growing up. But I decided that growing vegetables that are healthy, resistant to diseases and insects would be fun, and that was the turning point for me. And so I just I can feel for you farmers. I've been there. I've been farming for 3 years, produce. So when I started to work for Keystone Bio, I just saw that there's a huge amount of knowledge here that you farmers do not get. So we're going to be talking about how to get there, and I don't think I have all the answers, but we've heard a lot of things here. So we're going to be talking about needing a tool that we can trust. I trust SAP-Test, and I'm going to get back to that in a little bit again. And we need management. I feel most of the stuff in growing healthy crops, vegetables, dairy farming, whatever, a lot of it's related to management. There's also, sometimes when I hear of a success story that people have, my thoughts go to, well, we can have the best management, we can have all the tools we need, but we still need the Lord's blessings. So that's one thing I want everyone to keep in mind. It's still, we can have all the management we want. We still need the Lord's blessings. It's something to keep in mind. I feel a good manager can make bad fertilizer work to some degree, and I also feel a good manager can make bad fertilizer. I'm getting a little bit mixed up, but a bad manager can make good fertilizer work to some degree. No. So anyway, talking about limiting factors, I feel you people are getting, I just want to express what limiting factors look like to me. And I saw that I get the comment sometimes that SAP-Tests are too expensive. And I think maybe it's because of you. The SAP-Test is only as good as those that are reading it. And so most farmers think, well, my calcium is low, I need to buy calcium. My zinc is low, I need to buy zinc. It's not just that, it's about interaction. So I'm just gonna make an illustration here to drive home my point. This is my imaginary farm. My imaginary cows are coming out. I spend a lot of money just like you do on your produce farms. So I need to do something so my cows don't come out. I'm gonna fix it. A little stronger, better, better, better. Huh. How about it? I don't think we fixed the problem. So to me, we all, everybody in this room knows what the problem is. We have a tool. We can see what is wrong. We also can use that same tool to see what is wrong with the plant, but in organic situation especially, it's going to be way too late. So we need a tool that we can trust. So if that is so, should I be doing sap tests on every crop? The short answer is no. I feel after doing some numbers, I came up with this. I also talked to Harold Schrock from AEA, and he gave me a few numbers, and then I punched some more numbers, and so I feel that a $5,000 pre-harvest value of a crop is about the minimum amount that you should be using sap tests on. So if you have a less than $5,000 crop, if it's a pretty good crop, it's fairly easy to manage, you probably don't want to be using sap tests. But anything over $5,000, if you take that $5,000 times 5%, $250, 250 divided by $75 a set is 3.33 sap tests. So the reason I came up with that number is I feel the minimum amount that you should be using is 3 tests so you can see trends. So let's take it a little further and say that your pre-harvest value is $10,000. You might realistically be spending $2,000 for, let's say, packaging and labor, and then another $500 for auction costs, and maybe the shipping part of it. So that would be $7,500 pre-harvest value. That would be 10,000, that's 2,000, that's 500, equals 7,500. 7,500 times 5% would be, I think, 375, and that would buy you 5 sap tests at $75 a set. So you could be doing 5 sap tests maximum for doing 5%. I feel that's 5% is a good number because if you use sap tests right, you should see at least 10% benefit from that. So we're saving you a little money, and we're giving a little bit to sap tests to help ensure that you get that 10%. So how many sap tests should I do? It varies from crop to crop. John and I were working on a spreadsheet last night of different crops, and we want to look over it a little bit more, so that'll probably be available in the future. Recommend a minimum 3 tests, start at the young stage. And I feel that's pretty important. Maybe point out that at the young stage, you could use 1 test. That would be half of the tests. There's 2 tests in a set. So it would be 1 test, and then it would be half of the $75 would be that cost. But I don't want you to get the idea that you can just use 1 test and get the full benefit of the sap test, because I feel that. So if you divide the set, it would be $75 divided by 2, would be 50% of the value. I feel you actually only get 25% of the value. Now, I don't know what John and Short think about that, but I feel that you only get 25% of the value if you use 1 test versus 2 tests, because you don't have your mobile nutrients. So continue to harvest. Why would you do that? Because if your crop collapses during the last stages, you now have a tool that you can trust to tell you what you need to do to fix that crop. Maybe it's not going to help you this year, but next year. So why are good records important? I also wanted to touch records a little because I feel it's an important part of management. Help farmers make important management decisions. Help you repeat success. So if you have success this year, you want to repeat it? Of course you do. Maybe you want to get better, but at least you want to repeat it. So to repeat success, maybe it's necessary that we define what is success. I see that a lot. So people put nitrogen on and they think, wow, it's looking really good. Huh. Then the next guy, maybe a biological farmer, comes more like this, and it doesn't really look good on the top. So that was a picture that I really liked, and I thought, well, you know, maybe I should include that today. So when I was farming, I like to have good records. I'm not saying I'm a good record keeper, but I used something similar to this that I upgraded a little when I started working for Keystone to give you farmers a tool to better manage your nutrition. So let's just say, for example, today you're doing a foliar spray. So this is your color for today. This is your color for next time. So if you put 2 quarts of Rejuvenate, I would put 2 here, and always use it in quarts. Don't do write 1 gallon here and then 2 quarts here and 2 quarts here. Because if you do that, you can't easily add it up the next time. So always either decide which measurement you're going to use. Maybe a quart here, and for some things it would be ounces. But always make that you can add it up. I think I'm going to let it with that for that sheet. Then here, this is more the end of the year thing. And here's your total. You write how many gallons this lines up with the other sheet. Put your total here. By the cost you got it, is your total there. That total gets over there. The funny part about SAT tests, over there you see a SAT test. That's your breakdown. Sometimes when I see these sheets, they come back with a $70,000 or a $40,000 total profit amount over there. And I look up to see what their expenses are. And the SAT tests are a little penny from those thousands, maybe $325. So I'm not sure where your farmers are coming from when you say SAT tests are too expensive. I don't understand. No, unless you're not using them properly. So here's one for dairy farmers. This is pretty close to what I was using. This is now converted to individual field. Here's your date and your input. Maybe you put Photomag, 2 gallons. Application method would be, that's put in there for if you wouldn't be spraying, maybe you put a dry fertilizer on in the spring. You would put that there and just dry spread or something. And then put your cost in there. Here's your seeding and planting record. These records really help for organic certifiers. They'll remember you if they come back to your farm. And they will remember you. I had my certifier tell me that always when she sees my name, she always thinks of my tab record book. I'm not trying to brag, it's just reality that they will remember if you have good records. And I actually don't think they ask as many questions if you have good records, because they think you're going to have it somewhere in that book anyway. So talking about breaking yield barriers, I just wanted to get the point across to you that breaking yield barriers is not as much pushing yield, push your quality first, and the yield will follow. So with that short, I welcome you back. Here. Oh yeah, dealing with you guys. And I was a little disappointed with some of the farmers not showing up because I wanted to get them to get the point across to them what SAT test is all about. So I was a little disappointed, but I just want to thank every one of you for being here because this was not going to happen right away again. So thank you.
Thank you, Melvin. No, it should be fine. Thanks, Melvin. I think you just got voted and nominated in for a new job description at Keystone BioAg. No further comments right now. We'll save those for later. All right. So
For the last day and a half, you've heard Jurd talk about some of the various nutrient interactions and some of the experiences that he has had and things that they've worked with over the last 10 years. You've heard some of the experiences some of the team at Keystone has had from John and from Melvin. And what I wanted to talk about this afternoon is how do you take all this information and actually make management decisions from it? So this is something I've tried to describe earlier in some of the various presentations that I've done, and I haven't felt as though I was able to effectively communicate what I was trying to describe. And so what I realized, what I worked on, and have been working on, is thinking about, okay, what is this specific logic process? What are the logical pathways that we use to make decisions? When we get a SAP analysis report, how do we take that report and use that to make recommendations? So if you want to flip back to the front where my presentation was, so this continues from where I left off yesterday morning. And also, there are going to be 2 pages, 2 handouts that we'll be working with. One of them, Melvin, you may need to help me out a bit here. One of them was a SAP analysis report that was circulated this morning. Every one of you should have one of that. And then also, Melvin, where is the worksheet? Is that at the same spot as my presentation?
No, that's in the back.
All right, we'll save that for later. Don't worry about the worksheet for right now. All right, so how do we make recommendations? Jurd has, over the last day and a half, on several occasions, talked about the plant health pyramid that we put together. And I believe that most of you here in this room are very familiar with the plant health pyramid, so I'm not going to elaborate on that in any detail. But if you've heard of us talking about the SAP analysis pyramid, there is one thing that I have said over and over again. When we look at the pyramid, we have the first level, the foundational level is when we have really good photosynthesis, really good carbohydrate synthesis and complete carbohydrate conversions to where we have very low levels of reducing sugars in the plant sap. And the second level is where we have protein synthesis, forming complete proteins, not having any soluble amino acids or soluble nitrates or ammonium in the plant sap. The third level is where we have formation of lipids and fats. And then finally, the fourth level, the top, is where we have all these elevated levels of plant secondary metabolites. Something that you've heard me say many times is that the first 2 levels, photosynthesis and protein synthesis, achieving those 2 levels of plant health is purely a function of mineral balance and nutrient balance. You can do it in a hydroponic situation very easily without any microbes, without any soil. If you then want to get to level 3, level 4, you have to have good biology in the root system. So that then, growers have been asking the question, okay, if we can achieve level 1 and level 2 with nutrient balance, how do we do that? What are the important minerals and how do we think about this? So what I've realized over the last number of years working with SAP analysis, that we've adopted an algorithm, if you will, a way of thinking about SAP analysis for specifically how we make recommendations. And so I'm going to just describe this for you very quickly, and then we're going to go through this one SAP analysis report, and each one of you is going to make your own set of recommendations based on how we think about them. So there are a series of priorities when we look at a SAP analysis. The first priority, priority number 1, is that we need to address the nutrients that are needed for photosynthesis. So these nutrients that are needed for photosynthesis are the nutrients that are directly involved with chlorophyll production. These are the same nutrients that are needed at level 1 of the plant health pyramid. You don't need to write them down because they're already written down in the worksheet for you. But these nutrients are going to be magnesium, iron, manganese, phosphorus. I think the phosphorus, maybe that's it. Maybe those 4. So those 4 are priority 1. Those are the first that have to be addressed. Then we look at priority 2. We need to address the nutrients that are needed for protein synthesis to form complete proteins. And these nutrients, you've heard Jurd just talk about magnesium, sulfur, and molybdenum. And we have found that to be very true. And Jord you've expressed that you're jealous of the results that we get in reducing nitrates. Well, we do it using your secrets. We just use magnesium, sulfur, and molybdenum. So you give us the information. And then we add one more. And this fourth element is boron. Because we have found that we were able to get nitrate conversion, but in order to get good disease resistance to some of the beetle family, like flea beetles, for example, or leaf hoppers, we need to address nitrates, and the plants need to have generous levels of boron. And when we address those nutrients, the insect pressure drops tremendously. So that's the second area that we need to focus on. But when we talk about priority 1, priority 2, priority 3, priority 4, addressing the nutrients needed for protein synthesis in priority 2 is only going to work if the nutrients in priority 1 are already in place. So you can't skip a step. You have to do this in sequence. You have to do it in the right order. You can't expect, if you want to get good protein synthesis and resistance to corn earworm, for example, you can't just go out there and put on a foliar spray of magnesium, molybdenum, sulfur, and boron and expect to get resistance to corn earworm if you haven't already addressed the iron and the manganese and the phosphorus and the other nutrients needed in step 1. So that's very important, is you have to address them in the sequence. And then next, the third priority is we have to address the nutrients which serve as the antidotes for the excesses. Now, in mainstream agronomy, the common paradigm has always been that, and Jord has described this for us very well already, but the mainstream paradigm has been that if we have a calcium deficiency, we need to go out and apply more calcium. And when in fact, what we have observed with SAP analysis over the last 4 years is that in many cases with the macronutrients, all the major elements, nitrogen, phosphorus, potassium, magnesium, calcium, etc., in many cases, the deficiencies that farmers are experiencing are a result of the excesses of the products that they have applied. So growers are unintentionally actually creating most of their own problems. And as Jord has described for us very clearly, there is no value. If you have a calcium and potassium imbalance, it is completely pointless to address calcium. It makes no sense to continue putting on foliar applications of calcium. You first have to address the potassium excess. So priority 3 is not putting on what's deficient. It's putting on the antidote to the excesses. So in the case of calcium and potassium, for example, we have to put on the antidote for the excess of potassium. How do we get that plant to regulate? How do we help that plant to regulate potassium the way that it wants to? And in the case of this specific example, we address manganese because we know that when we put on manganese, the potassium levels are going to go down, and that allows calcium to come up all by itself. So that's priority 3. Then we look at priority number 4. And only at priority 4 do we address the nutrients that are deficient. So if we continue with our calcium potassium example, it makes no sense to address calcium until we take care of the manganese application first. So what does this look like? I put together this worksheet, and I would now like for you to flip to the back and look for this worksheet that is in there. Melvin, can you tell us where it is?
Well, it's
The very last page.
I copied it both sides so that they can use the one today and then pick the one to copy.
Okay, perfect. So I made some slight changes to this worksheet since I put it up here. It's not the very last one.
I wonder if
don't have it? Fun. It looks just like this.
I put it in order on the table, but then put it, and I was helping. Hey, maybe they missed the last.
Oh, Melvin, I think you and I are gonna have a conversation. All right, let me pull up the more recent one that I put together. There are some slides on page 6 and 7, but I had a full page printout as well, so. Did I describe this? Here we go. All right, so I'm disappointed that you don't have this page, but Keystone is going to have it and we'll print it out for you. We can also send it to you because this page is going to be a pretty important page. So when we look at this, I put these in columns in terms of the priorities that you need to address. And actually, here we go. Now you can see all of it. All right, so you will notice that not everything that is reported on SAP analysis is on this page. So if you look all the way at the top, for example, I don't have EC and I don't have pH and I don't have sugars. Why not? Because as Gert described earlier, the question then came up that, or the comment rather, that pH is really not that important. And the answer is no, it's not. Why? Because pH is a result. pH is a result of the nutrient balance. It's a symptom. You can look at the pH, but in reality is if you balance the nutrients, the pH is going to take care of itself. If you balance the nutrients, the EC is going to take care of itself. And if you balance the nutrients, the sugar is going to take care of itself. So yesterday morning, one of the comments that I made is the value that I see of using SAP analysis is that it gives you actionable data. You can have the data that you can actually make management decisions from. And you can't make management decisions from pH and EC and sugar content. They may be able to give you some insights, but you can't really use them to make decisions. These are the elements that you can use to make decisions. So in looking at this chart, the first set of priorities is the first column. We need to address the nutrients that are involved in protein synthesis, or excuse me, photosynthesis. So those elements are magnesium, they're the ones that are highlighted in red. Magnesium, total nitrogen, phosphorus, iron, and manganese. We have to address those 5. Those 5 have to be in place before we can move on to the area of priority 2. So then, when we look at priority 2, we now have 3 additional nutrients which we need to address, which are sulfur, boron, and molybdenum. And then we look at the third column up here. Can you see? Yeah, you guys can see the cursor. Okay. So when you look at the third column, you can now go through and checklist all the excesses. You could say, for example, that we have excess of potassium and that we have excess of sodium. I'm just making it up. So this next column that we put here is the nutrients that serve as the antidotes for whatever's on the left-hand side. So we look at this, we say, okay, we have excessive potassium here. That means we need to address manganese. Now we can drop down here in this third column and say, okay, we have to address manganese. We have to pay attention to manganese as well as everything else. So then, and we can fill in, let's say we have a, and then for excess of sodium, we have a deficiency of, we need to address calcium. And so we'll come up here and we'll check mark calcium as well. So now, sorry. Yeah, that's the right spot. So the idea is that, and then you might look at deficiencies, identify a couple deficiencies, And now you come over to these columns, and I specifically put these ranges here. So when you think about making recommendations, rather than thinking about recommendations in the context of I need 3 pounds of product X or 2 quarts of manganese or whatever the case might be, I'd encourage you to think of them in terms of ranges of low, medium, and high. I need a low application of manganese, or I need a high application of manganese. So to think about this, the ranges that you need, that you might need, are going to be a result of 2 things. First, they are a result of what is the actual level on the SAP analysis? Is it slightly deficient or is it extremely deficient? And second, where is the crop right now? What's the total crop biomass? So for example, if you have a tomato seedling that is 2 feet tall versus a tomato plant that is 5 feet tall, the quantity of nutrient that you might have the exact same levels on a SAP analysis, but for the plant that is much bigger, has a lot more biomass, you might move from a low application rate to a high application rate of the same nutrient, just because you have a lot more plant biomass and the plant is a lot bigger. And then, now, you can follow this, and you can go down the list on the right-hand side and say, okay, I need low application rate of potassium, I need a medium application rate of manganese, I need a high application rate of zinc, whatever it might be. And you can follow this pathway to determine the nutrients that you need to address for foliar applications, for drip irrigation recommendations, whatever the case might be. And in cases, we use this same pathway when we are working with crops where we have economic limitations, financial limitations. So say, for example, we're working with a corn grower, and corn producers are only able to, they may only have $15 to $20 per acre to work with in their budget for a foliar spray. If that's the case, we will start on the left-hand side. We'll say, okay, these are the nutrients that we need to address in priority 1 area. And we'll address those nutrients. We'll see where we are against the budget. Maybe it costs us $10 to apply the nutrients in level 1, in priority 1. Then we look at priority 2, we address those nutrients. And that may be all that we may have the financial capacity to address. We may not have the ability to address priority 3 or priority 4 on some very slim margin crops. And so if that's the case, we don't address them. You have to follow the sequence. So even if though, let's say, going back to our corn example, you may have a very severe calcium deficiency that's showing up on SAP analysis. But if you put on a foliar spray of calcium by itself, and you don't address level 1, level 2, level 3, then there will be no economic crop response. And this is the key word. We arrived at this sequence using this process by looking at one value only. And the question that we ask constantly is, what is it that makes the farmer money? So if you have a calcium deficiency on a low value crop like this, you go out and put a foliar spray of calcium. You can fix the calcium problem, but there will not be an economic response for the grower. And the reason for that is because you may fix the calcium problem, but if you fix the calcium problem and he still has other problems with not having enough magnesium or not having enough phosphorus, that slows down photosynthesis. Photosynthesis is really what is driving yield. And you have to increase photosynthesis to have an impact on yield and to have an impact on economics. And if you address calcium without addressing those other things, you can make a nicer looking SAP analysis, and you can fix your calcium problem, but the grower won't make any more money. So for that reason, you have to follow these steps all the way through it. So I feel like I've given you guys a lot of information really fast. You're all looking kind of dumbfounded. What are the questions? What questions do you guys have at this point? It's not really that complicated. Yes.
When can I have a worksheet?
Well, you can just memorize this one. We won't give you one.
I'm having trouble visualizing it. You have one that's filled out that shows how you
Yes.
think about your
Do a question? Yes, what I was hoping to do was, if you had these worksheets, we were actually going to go through the exercise of putting one together. We may still have the chance to do that. So let me switch back here. All right, and so I modified, I put this together originally, and then I sent it out to several people with no explanation at all. No explanation. I didn't tell them what I was doing. I just asked them, can you understand this? And that was kind of my idiot-proof measurement, is if they can understand it without instructions, then it makes sense. It's something, I believe something has to be clear enough that you can use it without instructions. And they didn't understand columns 3 and 4, priority 3 and 4, which is why I added in that additional column of these are the antidotes for the excesses. So that is on the revised worksheet that Keystone has. So that is one difference that is going to be here from the others that we worked through. So here's an example SAP analysis. These are Honeycrisp apples, and this is just one that I selected at random with no particular criteria. So when we look at this report, we can go down through this, we look at the potassium numbers. We see that we have a generous level of potassium. We see that the plants are very deficient in calcium. Magnesium levels are low, sodium levels are almost non-existent on the chart. And then we have a touch of ammonium, but we have no nitrates, which is good. Total nitrogen is in the middle of the chart. Chloride is on the low side. Sulfur is quite low because it's very low on the new leaves, even though sulfur on the old leaves is adequate. Phosphorus is about where it needs to be. We have good phosphorus levels, which is good. As an interesting side note, if you think about this, we have phosphorus here at 448 and 480 parts per million. If we go back one step, look at calcium. With calcium in the new growth at 398 parts per million, so we actually have less calcium than we do phosphorus on that new growth, which is an explanation for why we have a pH of 6, such an acidic pH that's showing up there. So we continue, silicon levels, middle of the range, perfectly good. Iron is very low. Manganese is very low on the new growth. Zinc, slightly low on the new growth. Boron levels, slightly low on the new growth. And copper levels are in the middle of the chart about where they need to be. And molybdenum, we have a desired level that there's no graph on the molybdenum, but we need to see that about 0.05 to 0.1. So we know that we have low levels of molybdenum as well. We need to address that. So just a quick review now. We switch to this. What does this look like? Okay. First, we look at priority 1. And when we go back through that test, we see that we have low levels of magnesium, iron, and manganese. Priority 2, we have every one of the nutrients needed for priority 2 is low. And for priority 3, we have high potassium, so we're addressing manganese. And then we have calcium and sodium and zinc deficiency. So that's the order of priority that we're going to address them. So what I would like to do is just to make this a little bit more helpful and productive. We're going to switch back here. And we're actually going to go through this exercise with the SAP analysis that you have in front of you so that we can look at this. So all right, you guys hear me okay? Yep. All right, so all of you should have a SAP analysis that the plant SAP sample date is 15/8/2016. Peppers King Arthur. Anyone of you guys not have it? If you don't have one, you guys can share that one perhaps. Okay. Okay. Looks like we're good. All right, so going through this, let me make some quick adjustments here. And no, that did not work. make this a little bit easier to read. Perfect. Okay.
John,
Yes.
could you help out my failing eyesight and see if you could adjust that focus just a little bit? Or is it just me?
It's definitely just you.
Yeah. That's what I was afraid of.
This any better?
All right.
Yes,
Can you see it more clear now?
that's a little better.
Okay. And let me see if I can also adjust this. Okay. All right. So got the SAP analysis in front of me. I'm not going to look at the SAP analysis. I'm going to let you guys tell me what's going on. So when we look at priority 1, the nutrients needed for photosynthesis. The first one on the list is magnesium. Does this SAP analysis need more magnesium? No. No? Okay, what about nitrogen? Does it need more nitrogen? What about phosphorus? Needs phosphorus? Okay, checked off phosphorus. What about iron? What about manganese? You guys think it needs manganese?
It's fine. Oh, no, no.
Well, if it's low in the young, then yes, we need to address it. Iron levels, yeah, this is actually interesting. We often have low levels of iron, but we have enough iron here. Okay, so now we look at priority 2, protein synthesis. Do we have enough sulfur? Okay, we're going to address sulfur. Do we have enough boron? Do we have enough moly?
Yes.
Okay. All right.
Check.
Boron is 310, 185. Boron's kind of a question mark. So I actually, if you look at this, and this is something Jord and Melvin, Jord particularly talked about a little bit. We've been working on putting together our own desired values based on what we see, how we see crops performing here in the US. And as a result, we're looking at slightly different desired values than what they have already established in these bar graphs. Now we're in the process of changing that. Jord and his team are right now working on putting the bar graphs where we have seen that they will work best for the US crops. So when you get SAP analysis reports in 2017, they're going to have different types of bar graphs. But for the moment, what Melvin has done is when you look at this SAP analysis, there is this column of numbers on the left-hand side of the parts per million column. And this is the desired ranges that we have established as being the best for this crop here in the US. So if you look at boron, we've said that peppers do best at 4 to 5 parts per million boron. And we only have 3 and 1.8. So if you look just at the bar graph, you would say, yeah, this plant has enough boron. But if you look at the desired levels of what we know is works best in the States, we realize that we need more boron. So we need to address boron as well. Thanks for pointing that out, Cletus. And molybdenum levels are good. This guy must be on the Keystone program. Okay, so now let's look at the excesses. What nutrients do we have in excess here, if any? Magnesium is kind of going off the charts on the older leaves, but on the new leaves it's fine. So it's not something that we need to address very directly. Sodium is on the high side. So, you mean the desired values? So, there is one very important difference between the desired values of Nova Crop Control that Jord and his team have put together and the desired values that we've put together. The difference is this. In all the trials that Jord and his team have been conducting with various crops and various nutrients, they did these various water treatment trials to look at what point does the plant start showing deficiency symptoms and at what point does it start showing toxicity symptoms. So it's deficiencies versus toxicities and the ranges in between those. Those are the way that they have looked at what these plants really need. And the approach that we have taken to setting these values is to look at all the crop data that the crops that we have been working with in the United States, and to ask ourselves the question, okay, where are the optimum performing crops? Where are the crops that are doing the best, that are outperforming everything else? Let's look at what those desired values, what those crops' nutritional profiles are, and use those to create optimum performance. So it's a difference between deficiency versus toxicity and optimum performance. So that is why we're looking at slightly different numbers. So this is why we changed the numbers on the sodium. So we look at sodium and we say, okay, we have higher levels of sodium than the optimum range. The antidote to high sodium is we need to address calcium. So I'm going to make another check mark right here. We also need to address calcium. Then what else is showing up really high? Ammonium is on the high side. And ammonium is one of those we can make an X here, but we don't have a magic solution for that one yet. There's no immediate antidote. Unless maybe George has a magic trick that he hasn't told us about yet. All right. And then when we look at this, what else shows up as being excessive? Iron is on the high side, but I'm guessing that's because of application. And that again is not something that there is an immediate antidote for. Copper and moly are both really high.
Copper is right in range. It's 3 to 5, and that's what you want.
Actually, it's true. That's true. So here again, copper is on the bar graph. It's showing high. But if you look at the desired value, it's really not that much off of what we're looking for.
The bars will change when we use yours.
Right. Exactly. So that's going to.
You're not learning that, but it's not be necessary. We change the values to that.
Right.
Right.
Yeah. Then you got the bars based on that. And it takes probably 2 weeks or so. Then it's done.
2 weeks from today.
We were expecting to have it done tomorrow.
John, if we raise up the phosphorus, will that bring down some of the microbes that are excessive?
Very good question. So the question was, if we increase the phosphorus levels, won't that decrease some of the trace minerals? And the answer is probably yes. As George has described for us very well the last couple of days, is that there is an antagonistic relationship between phosphorus and these various trace minerals. So as phosphorus levels go up, then there's a strong likelihood that these high levels of iron and copper, zinc, etc., those levels will start dropping a little bit as phosphorus goes up all on its own. The plant won't absorb them nearly as well anymore.
That's why it's so efficient. First.
Yeah, exactly. So, lastly, we look at deficiencies. So what are the major deficiency areas that we haven't addressed yet? Okay, we go down through the list. Potassium is showing on the low side when we look at the graph, but they still have higher levels in the old leaves than they do in the new. And they're kind of crossing over the low range of our ideal desired values that we've seen for U.S. peppers. So we see that peppers absorb potassium really well, and I'm not really concerned with these potassium levels in peppers at this point. We look at calcium levels, and we would love to see those higher. So yeah, we do need to address calcium. We look at magnesium levels. Not really a major need to address magnesium at this point. Sodium is okay. We're going to drop down to looking at chlorides. Chlorides are fine. Sulfur is on the low side. Okay. Okay, we've already addressed sulfur because of protein synthesis. We've already addressed phosphorus. Silica is on the low side, which is interesting. So we're going to add silica. We need to address silicon here. And then we've already looked at iron and manganese. We haven't looked at zinc. We have said that we have a desired range of zinc 10 to 12, and this agrees with the bar graph. So no need to address additional zinc. Boron levels are actually a little bit lower than what we would like to see with this crop, and that would correspond to the low calcium level. So we're also wanting to address boron. So we address boron as well. And we have an adequate supply of copper. Moly is fine, and aluminum is where it needs to be. So now we can look at this and say, okay, we need to address calcium. How much do we need to apply? Do we need to apply a low, medium, or high application rate? And I don't know what the specific scenario was for this crop plus stage of growth was when the sample was taken. But you can now look at this and say, okay, I need to put on a high application of calcium. I need to put on more sulfur, phosphorus, etc. You can go flow down through this list, and you can make your own recipe for foliar application very simply and very easily. So, what questions do you guys have on this? This is an important part. I want to make sure you get it thorough.
I have a question on, let's say the manganese, the young leaves are efficient and the old leaves and show an excess.
Yeah.
So how you make a balance there?
So, if you look at this chart, it shows where the nutrient deficiencies are showing up. Will show up first. The manganese, actually, there is a disagreement. We were actually talking about this earlier. There is a disagreement in some of the literature about manganese mobility. And some people say that it's slightly mobile, and others say that it's completely immobile and doesn't move around. So irregardless of that slight disagreement, manganese deficiencies will always show up on the top first. It tends to stay in the lower older leaves, a little bit like calcium does. So we can look at manganese and say, yeah, the old leaves are higher, but we don't believe that it's going to move out of the old leaves up to the upper parts of the leaves. And particularly, we don't think it's going to move out of the bottom up into the fruit. So we want to put on a foliar application of manganese to address that. Yeah. You had a question? Yeah.
Yeah, because phosphorus is in your first column of high priority, would you automatically put on a higher amount, or do you look at the numbers?
So to decide whether I want a low, medium, or high application rate, I look at the numbers. I say, okay, we have a desired value of 350 to 400, and we're a little bit over halfway there. And so that's the first step. And then just looking at that, I say, okay, this plant is approaching the point where it's going to be very deficient, and we need to put on a hefty dose of phosphorus. So this is bad enough that just looking at this, I would go with a high application rate of phosphorus. But then the second consideration is also to ask, okay, is this pepper plant 12 inches tall or 4 feet tall? That's going to have an impact as well.
In Pittsburgh, you said if you use the columns to determine high, low, and medium.
I'm now telling you something new. I changed my opinion.
Well, wouldn't that help determine the phosphorus?
So the comment was that in an earlier SAP analysis seminar, I described looking at the 3 columns on the graph and using those for low, medium, and high application rates. That can be useful, but it's not enough in and of itself. You also need to take into consideration where the plant is. Yes.
And we know without having experience how much to put on for the antidote.
So the question was, can you know without having experience how much to put on for the antidotes? Very good question. So I would look at it in exactly the same way to say, how extreme is the excess? And the greater the extreme of the excess, the more material you need to put on to counterbalance it. That's the way that I would look at it. And yes, experience is definitely going to help you to say, okay, with this crop, I know that with a pepper crop, I can put on a foliar spray of 1/4 manganese and I'm going to get this type of response. But to get that same response on cantaloupe, I might need to put on 4 quarts to get the same amount of response. So yeah, there's going to be some experience that comes with that because different crops respond in different ways. And that's also where Keystone can help you out a little bit. But the important part is when we look at this as a tool, if you use this as a tool with SAP analysis, you can learn very quickly to say, okay, I put on a quart of manganese 2 weeks ago, and the SAP analysis changed by this much. So it changed, it went in the right direction, but not by enough. So this week I'm going to put on 2 quarts. So you can very quickly use that as a learning tool to see and to gauge where you need to be. And it'll come very quickly. It's not that difficult to figure out. Yeah.
So with the amount of phosphorus, if your recommendation is gallon per acre, you want to put on a high application, you would be putting on more than a gallon per acre.
So the question was,
application putting on
right.
half a gallon per acre.
So the question was, when we're talking about low, medium, high application rates, how does that transfer to actual products? And I structured it in this way specifically to not be preferential to advancing eco-agricultural products or any other products. In general, I would say look at the recommended application rates on the label and use those as your range of low, medium, and high. So some products might be 1 quart to 2 quarts. Some might be 2 quarts to 8 quarts as a range. And so use those ranges of the recommended label rates as your low, medium, and high range. It's going to vary from product to product. Yeah. Yes.
You said you don't know what stage these pepper plants are in, you missed one out. Yeah.
You mean the date? I wasn't looking at the date.
The other thing is, sure was telling us, one test is not nearly as good as the series. I had
Yeah.
one before this one, I could.
Absolutely.
How fast this one.
Great point, Cletus. I couldn't endorse what you said anymore, is that looking at this one piece of paper, if on a scale of 1 to 10, in terms of quality of management information and quality of being able to make decisions, on a scale of 1 to 10, a tissue analysis is about a 2, one SAP analysis is about a 4, and if you have a set of 3 SAP analysis, that's a 9. Because you can make much better decisions and have a much more accurate picture of what's happening, what's going on, when you have a series of data points than when you just have one window in time. Because this doesn't tell you whether the plant is trending up or trending down with any one of these nutrients. It's a very great point. Completely agree. Yes.
I see you have, for example, calcium has 2 columns where it's required or is asking for extra calcium. Would that tend to push it to the next higher application rate, having 2?
So you're saying that calcium could be showing up here and then again here?
Yeah, showing up as an antidote and a
Right.
deficiency.
The short answer is no. That would not increase the application rates needed. So even if it just showed up in 1 column or in 2, the application rates would be the same. So is this clear? Does this make sense?
Yes.
Yeah.
Good. We have another question.
You were saying you should say with this test, you address the first row with your red blocks.
Right.
And you take another test before you move on to your next.
No.
To your next row. Would you do it across the whole rows on your?
If
at
you
the
have,
same time?
yes. So if you have a high value crop, like tomatoes or strawberries or something like that, then you can address everything immediately, right up front. But thinking about it in terms of priorities is, if you have even some apple growers now in some parts of the country, apples are becoming a crop with a fairly limited budget because they need to compete with Chinese imports. And so they may not want to put on a foliar application that costs $40 per acre. They may want to put one that costs $20 per acre once every 2 weeks. So we look at this and we say, okay, if we can only do $20 per acre, then we're going to focus on priority 1 and priority 2, and we're going to leave number 3 and 4 for 2 weeks later. So it's not so much a question of what can the crop absorb and how is the crop going to respond, because you can do all of these at one time and the crop will respond very, very well. But if you have financial limitations, you need to look at it from this sequential perspective. And however, with that being said, we have some really high value crop growers that do foliar feeding every 48 to 72 hours. They're constantly in greenhouses and greenhouse production. And in those situations, we do it sequentially, one right after the next, because we find that when we address level 1 and level 2 first, those first two priorities, then they respond much, much better to the later foliar applications. So if you have a plant that isn't photosynthesizing well because it doesn't have enough magnesium and manganese, for example, and we first put on a foliar spray of magnesium and manganese, and then we come back 48 hours later with a foliar spray of calcium, the plant's calcium absorption, the calcium response is going to be much better and much stronger than if we combine it all at one time. So we have observed that happening, but that isn't practical, of course, for most of the crops that we're growing. So we just combine everything into one. Yeah. Yes.
I heard you say before that the first column, the red blocks, are you need sulfur in there instead of the total nitrogen. Did you change that or?
No. A couple of years ago, 2 years ago, so when I talked about this, I combined the nutrients in level 1 and level 2 together. So I had both magnesium and sulfur listed in here as well. And so if you remember the nutrients that Jure talked about and that we talked about for protein synthesis being magnesium, sulfur, moly, those three, if you look at this, I didn't put magnesium in level 2 because it's already addressed in level 1. So if it's taken care of there, you don't need to address it again. So, and the same with the boron applications is boron isn't necessarily a part of those three, but it's specifically involved for resistance to many of the beetles, like flea beetles and Colorado beetles and so forth. So we also put that in column 2 as well. All right, so, yes.
Additives for excessive, those are all the only additives you have for
Right now, these are the ones that I'm comfortable putting on a piece of paper.
with boron. You would not use water for water then?
No,
No, because you'd be with.
no. I mean, there's a few more that you can put here with excess of boron, for example. Could have put calcium in there. We know I'm quite certain of that one. But zinc, manganese, iron, we can put in phosphorus. So I could maybe fill this out a little bit more. But if this is something that I want to use all over the country, then there's some things that don't transfer all the way across. That's why I haven't filled this out in any more detail right now. So why don't we we've been here for an hour after lunch. Let's take a 10-minute bio break and then come right back after that. And Jordan and I will answer questions for the rest of the afternoon. And if you could, look at your watches and try to be diligent about coming back here in 10 minutes instead of 15. So we don't have to crack the whip too loud. All right, see you.
Center.
Which makes it so simple. Yeah, but I started thinking, how do I think about it when I think recommend? Because for me, it's so intuitive.
Because in reality, all three of these if the you gotta have a question. Okay. Go. Ask him that question. That's the worst mistake you've ever made. Yeah. Well, you really well, but I. Well, round three. Well, some people are. Right. But yeah, just one day. Did a 1 day course.
Thank you. Nicely done. Yeah, yeah.
No, I was not, I just created it.
I'm sorry. Much better than Thorny. I do. I'll grab a glass.
All right. So you guys can find your seats. We'll try to get started again. For the rest of the afternoon, what we have in the outline is wanting to just have kind of an open question and answer discussion with any remaining questions that you guys might have. But then in addition to that, I know that Jord has many additional stories as well. And I know the agenda and the outline says that Jord and I are both going to be up here, but you guys can come to seminars where I'm talking anytime, and Jord only comes to the United States every time we twist his arm hard enough. So I would say take advantage of that while you can, and ask him as many questions as you can. So Jord, I have one question for you. It's left in the question box. If sugars in the old leaves are very high, excuse me, if sugars in the old leaves are low and in the young leaves they're high, does that mean that my plants are healthy or unhealthy?
Okay. Depends on the crop. I suppose. Did everybody understand the question? It's your question. Or okay. I was meant. Did everybody understand the question? Sorry. It kind of depends on the crop.
So this would be tomatoes. Tomatoes.
In the tunnel. Yeah. What I experience is that sometimes the sun is not coming that far into the crop, so it will actually build sugars in the lower leaves, and it will consume all the energy in the top leaves, and then there's not much energy left to fall on the old leaves, so you won't build any sugars anymore. That's the main reason. So if your young leaves are pretty high on this crop, which doesn't get sun that much on the old leaves, you should have a healthy crop. Yes. Make sense?
It's a good question. Yeah. All right. Yeah.
Would you recommend thinning the leaves in that case, or?
Get the leaves out, you mean? No, you need a certain amount of respiration on the crop. And there is a kind of like a calculation based on the amount of leaves compared to production need. And in the Netherlands, we use in this the tomatoes you mentioned, also the Getzolan, I don't know how you mentioned. Indeterminate. We use between 15 and 17 leaves, depending on the crop stage. And the rest goes on.
All right. What questions do you guys have that have not been answered yet, that haven't even been thought about yet, and that you're going to be really bugged by if you get home and don't have answers to? So it's any questions you might that you guys might have for us? Yes, Jerry.
Do they use shade cloth in the Netherlands much? And if so, what shade cloth?
To prevent the sunlight from coming into the greenhouses, covering like.
Yeah. Okay, and does that have an impact on photosynthesis much?
Yes, they use kind of calcium spray to make the cover, to make it a little bit more white. In the sun, in the summer, for some tomato varieties or pepper varieties, to get a little bit less sun activity in the greenhouse to prevent blossom and rot. Yeah, and that's a temperature thing, and yeah, there are a few. Yeah, but you need special stuff which let certain UV light through, and otherwise no, so don't take your limestone and make your tunnel white, because it won't work.
Ours is great over here. You can get 30% blockage, 40%.
Yeah.
I'm just curious if they use it, what percentage they use. In other words, to what degree do you shade?
Yeah, as low as possible. As
low as possible, because you lose production potential. It's photosynthesis somehow. If you put too much on it, you have no level loss of mantle, but you lose 10% production overall.
Yeah, but isn't it stressful?
Better than can have 1% loss of mantle.
But it's very stressful to the plant at the peak of the day.
Yeah.
So, George, you just mentioned something very interesting I'd like to follow up on. They are shading these crops to reduce blossom end rot. How does that work?
The plant won't keep up with the evaporation if the temperature goes up too much, and then when the evaporation stops, the calcium uptake is done, and the feeding towards the young fruit is stopped, and then you end up in blossom.
Okay. Did you guys understand what he just said?
Yes.
Okay, because that's a very, very important piece. Calcium follows the water flow, follows the transpiration stream from the root system upward. And if you slow that down, you do not get calcium moving into the fruit or into the new growth.
Okay, could I answer that? What about this?
When you keep the plant cooler, yeah, it keeps evaporating, so that can be a positive thing. But depending on the health of the crop, you also stimulate moths. So there should be you should have a healthy crop to start misting, because if you don't have a healthy crop, you end up with a lot of botrytis and problem with fungi.
All right, what other questions? Or do you guys all have too much sugar at break time? Yes.
You had mentioned, or George mentioned before,
I was going to follow up on that and I missed it. Now you have to remember it, George.
Oh, yeah. Promise, right? I think I promised that I can make a kind of like a list of dates which are good and bad. And I can send it to Melvin, and Melvin, if he wants to, can share it with you guys.
Aren't they in the almanac?
Sorry?
Aren't those dates in the almanac?
Yes.
Well, yeah, the moon cycles are all there, but the only thing that we need to understand is which part of the moon cycle are they using to apply nutrients and which part are they avoiding it. And if we can understand that, then yeah, we can look at the almanacs and figure that out pretty easily.
Yeah. I can look for you after the course. It's in my lab. So I know exactly. Okay.
How would you go about sampling an athletic turf, mixed stand of species, blue rye, blue folk rescue?
As on a golf course turf or
golf?
Yeah. We got quite a lot of golf course clients, and they send in the clippings after mowing, but then they need to be careful with mowing with dew on it. You know what I mean?
How do you separate the old from the new?
Oh, you can't. Sorry, you cannot separate old from the new. Just send in the clippings, and you can do a good job.
What is it? What would I gain from a test? I'm not comparing, making that comparison.
Yeah, you cannot get it. No. But is there a possibility that you get young and old from
I could send you a patch of grass and you could pick out the new.
Yeah, theoretically, if you can, you probably get extra information, but no one does at the moment. So sorry, you need to forget this one young and old approach, but you can certainly look at the side range compared to the levels found. Most of the time, you see a lot of deficiency in the trace element and magnesium.
So what do you do then? Just a sequence? Just do several in sequence?
Yeah, every 2 weeks or every 3 weeks, yeah, depending on the financial economics, maybe every week. Well, people are rich, right? No.
Oh, yeah. Go ahead.
I think you have more like in the past, also mixed stands. Would it be a good idea to measure separate species in that stand separately? As some types of plants tend to run out of some stuff first.
Maybe. The question I would ask, I have one question and a comment. The question is, which of those forages in the stand is contributing most to your yield? So if you have a stand that's 80% orchard grass, you might want to measure just that. But secondly, I don't think it makes sense to combine legumes and grasses on the same sample. So I would definitely separate those out. So I might do all grasses and all legumes, but those two are going to be substantially different. I would separate those out. Yeah. You had a question? Yes, Eric?
Can we get the selenium and cobalt numbers if we request them on our samples?
Yes, but don't rush me too much, but
Okay.
yes, that's possible.
Okay.
That's possible. Yeah.
We don't need them before tomorrow morning. You've got plenty of time.
Yeah. If I wanted them tomorrow, I'd ask for them.
You got them too.
Yeah. Any other question back here?
Yes, the gentleman who couldn't be here, wanted me to ask that, throughout the years, the plant changes physiologically from vegetative to reproductive. The standards seem to stay the same. Can you explain why that is and why those processes don't change the demand?
In which crop, as an example?
Tomatoes.
Tomatoes. Okay. Yeah, good question. That's an advanced course.
All right.
But it's a good question. There is a sheet in my presentation with generative and vegetative promotion. And vegetative promotion, so leaves, N, P, K, a little bit magnesium. And lithium. A lot of growers who work with this approach a lot know these in here yet. And what we look like, if you go like for the potassium, if you go for the upper range of potassium, it will work vegetative, which a lot of tomato advice will say, push the potassium and you will get generative growth. I totally disagree with that. You just get more leaves, more leaves, more leaves, and less calcium in the fruit. So in our opinion, with trials and crops and varieties, if you push the potassium in tomatoes, you will get more vegetative growth. Until you push it that hard that the conductivity in the soil is getting up and you get salt stress, and then of course it goes generative, and then you lose 20% of your production. So yes, you can make it generative, but it's not very productive to do. And still a lot of people do it with all respect. So if you know this as a grower or as a consultant, you can divide the desired range in two sections, like vegetative and generative, in this case for the potassium. And you want to search for, when you're fruit setting, go more to the upper side, to the downside of the desired range, and when you're making leaves, go more to the upper side of the desired range. That's how we figured it out. And there is we're working on in this Bemesting Online program with colors in the desired range for generative vegetative. So it's a very good question, and we're actually working with that, but that's more
under development.
No, it's not under development. I thought it was maybe a little bit too hard to explain in this course, but we're definitely going to work with it. And if you remember this, if you look on the high end from the desired range, you will push it. If you go at the low end, you will just slow it down. And if you want a generative crop, you go low with your nitrogen, and your chloride, you go high. And then when you hit the moment that it's generative, you just go back a little bit. I don't know if you're familiar with Dan Scow and Arden Anderson. They were talking about foliar sprays, pushing the crop generative vegetative stage, and they just hit it with a foliar spray with chloride or phosphorus or calcium, and just push the crop generative, vegetative, and then it turns, and then try to grow again. So fruit set and then filling, fruit set, filling. And that's why we want to be in the middle, and then sometimes a little bit above, a little bit below. That's then you get maximum production.
Okay, but have we changed the range? Have those upper and lower lines
No.
changed?
No.
Ever?
No.
Regardless of what reproductive stage it may be?
No. No, and it's pretty wide. I mean, for potassium in tomato is 2,500 to 6,000. So theoretically, I could make stage 6,000 to 4,000 is the vegetative state, and 4,000 to 35 or 3,000 is a generative state, and then I'm not efficient and I'm not in toxicity. That's then when you work with the colors, you're going to see that. So the upper and downside doesn't change. It's more within the range and search for the different colors. Does it answer your question?
I don't think 100%.
You can come to me afterwards. I'm sorry. I can show you an example of a tomato grower who does it. Sure. Yeah.
Do you have any experience spraying amino acids in a foliar mix?
Yes. Positive about it. Yeah. Plant friendly nitrogen.
Do they change with vegetative and food state?
It's nitrogen in its own is more vegetative. So if you want to push generativity, you should be slow on the nitrogen side, and then when it is fruiting, when it is setting, you can go on again. Kind of like I told yesterday about this strawberry crop making flowers, flower initiation. You just make the crop turn towards fruiting, setting, and then push production again. But if you start pushing too early, you miss your fruiting and you miss your, it's only making leaves. I got 3 good questions here. Yes?
How can you use this information? Do you still soil test?
Yes.
And how would you use that information or the SAP analysis to figure out what dry minerals to put on the ground?
Yeah. Do we still do soil test? Yes. We do Albrecht analysis in the winter. So calcium, magnesium, base saturation, looking at the soil biology, that's all in the winter. I've learned that you cannot do a calcium, magnesium, base saturation test when there's a growing crop in the field, because the hydrogen from the roots will mess up your analysis, your pH. So the crop should be out, and then in the fall or in the winter you take your sample. So that's we do it in all fields. In the winter, take a sample to balance the structure, because calcium, magnesium is pretty important for structure. And when you get a good structure, you get oxygen, you get your soil life, and then things starts rolling. And if you don't have the oxygen, you lose your biology and you go backwards. And like the organic guy I showed this morning, he's doing, I think you call it a paste test or something, a water dissolvable test every 4 weeks. So we kind of look at the reserves in the soil too during the growing season next to the SAP analysis. But if we want to save, we go for the SAP instead of the soil, because the soil always over. I say the numbers are some, the paste tests are sometimes on the low end, but if you have a very good root system, there's no problem at all. So then we go for the plant will tell you the real story. But in some cases, it's nice to know if there's enough potassium left or nitrate left or whatever. But compared to 10 years ago, we do 1%. Wow. Yeah.
For those of us with orchards, we're coming into like warm, freaky weather, and it probably will get cold again. And last year we lost a lot of apples and peaches with hard frost after Mother's Day, like 8 or 9 days later. So any manipulation on raising frost temperatures with ecdysium or like any food?
Yeah, there was a recipe, but it's in there. It has to do with kelp, I think. Do you know?
We've been able to increase frost resistance by increasing levels of potassium and all the metals, zinc, manganese in the buds. Okay. It's made a big difference. Foliar application.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. And you got kelp in it too, I suppose.
Yes.
So high sugars would also keep it from freezing, right? Like that.
Well, particularly high levels of all the metals, and potassium in particular functions as an electrolyte in the bud. And as an electrolyte, it increases the salt. It's basically a salt, so it increases salt concentrations and lowers the freezing temperature.
And is that the day before frost for that evening or a week ahead?
You can do it the day before, or you can do it 6 weeks ahead. The smart growers do it 6 weeks ahead.
except that you're also adding potassium when you need calcium. So if you don't need it, it's better to not use it.
Right.
Can you, by tracking the sap tests in strawberries, for example, see when you're approaching that shift from vegetative to generative or bud formation? Or do you just have to know the life cycle of that plant?
In strawberries, like I showed you the example, I can see it, but that's one of the examples. Rest kind of hard to see in the set.
Sure.
Yeah.
Brown rot in peaches is a fungal disease that I was having trouble with. What I'm going to go shades and chestnut, manganese and silica would be helpful for that. And maybe John has some.
Yeah, brown rot in peaches, any experience?
It's connected to calcium potassium ratios.
Yeah, makes sense. Yeah. Calcium, potassium. So silica would help to get the calcium in. Yeah. We don't do peaches, but I would say the same for strawberries.
On sampling procedures, are you doing cereal brands?
Yeah.
Or new leads on those?
Yeah.
Once they're all of the
Yes.
process, before they really start shooting, you're using the bulk plant?
It's in the manual. I really don't know.
What about super crops, especially leaf crops, that go to the pet and start roots?
Yes. Yeah. Did I tell you? Oh, this time, no. Yes, that's nice. Yeah. I have a colleague who do asparagus root analysis. So he pulls samples from the soil, takes the root, cleans it out with just the sand is off, and distilled water, so you know that all the nutrients on the outside are off. Send it to the lab and we analyze. And the shoot content of the leaves or of the roots is the production potential. So we can calculate the better the sugars in the roots, the better the higher the production. And then I would like you to ask the question: what should he do to get maximum sugars in his roots? Which mineral should he back up? You know it? Nitrate, that's it. 80% of the sugar will go down.
What about boron and sugar transport?
I like it a lot. Push it.
Finish what you were going to say about the nitrate.
Nitrate is decreasing the sugars from all nutrients, 80% of the equation. No sugars, high nitrates. So when the strawberry advisor takes the nitrogen down, he increases the sugar, and that increases his production potential, potential production. So without nitrogen, he has a bigger production than with nitrogen. But it's always first the bank account, and then they are able to.
Before break, when we were talking about we're going over the sap analysis of the peppers and fixing the excesses and the deficiencies. I was a little disappointed you didn't point out the sequences of different the interaction between the different minerals when you were addressing some of the deficiencies.
Was it the pepper analysis John talked about?
Yeah. Is that something we should take into consideration, or is that just guesswork?
I don't understand the question totally. Do you, John?
I started looking at this when you were trying to fix the problem.
Why don't we talk about that afterwards? Let's just follow up on that discussion.
John will help you with your question specifically. Yes, no problem at all. Any other questions?
Yes, do you have any recordings from previous talks or seminars that maybe we could learn
Yeah,
from?
on the recordings, yes, John has EA website or.
Crop Health Labs website.
Crop Health Labs. Pretty inexpensive, in my opinion. You said 6 hours? 6 hours or something from 2 years ago? Yeah.
Right.
And Mr. Snyder, you watched a lot of these videos. You told me yesterday. So yes. Yeah,
Very good, very good.
Some of the slides are a little too small to read, and some of the visual deficiencies are kind of important to me when it's just a couple of plants and I can't sample them.
that makes sense.
Is it possible to get a electronic copy of the
That is
PowerPoint?
also, when you get the recording, there is, the recording is on a flash drive with the PowerPoint, with everything on it.
Yeah, full screen.
What do they run?
$95 or something like that, I'm not even sure.
What website was
Not
that?
actually cheap.
I don't know. CropHealthLabs.com.
And
All mental activity has shut down.
I hope you enjoyed. I'll be around. Maybe Sam, you wanted to say something? Or Melvin? I think the people out there are almost finished.
Just curious, talking about iron deficiency. John Dodd said he saw some, was it more eastern Pennsylvania? Did you see any iron deficiency?
The question is, do you see iron deficiency in eastern Pennsylvania, or what do you see the most?
We see iron deficiencies in 90% of the continental US. There's a few exceptions, but they're exceptions for sure.
It's SAP analysis or form.
SAP. Yeah.
Another question or something? Some more questions? Or is it, I'll be around. So.
On the, I think you were talking about the potash. Is the high potash more for the vegetative and the low potash for the fruit?
Yes, yes, yeah. So low potash is more for fruiting, high potash is more for vegetative stage growth.
Is there any other nutrient that is the same, like any mineral or?
Yeah, nitrogen is the same. But there is a slide in the first day somewhere in my first presentation. I think the last slide in my first presentation is vegetative and generative stage nutrients. So you can use that one.
You talked earlier about foliar feed affecting the test. You're doing it too close. Is there a safe time zone we should stop before, or should we just try to cover part of the plant every time we foliar feed?
Depends on the uptake, and that varies from product. So I should try to keep it practical. And if you see the numbers go up from your recommendation and you're still on the high end for what's necessary in the plant, then the second sampling, I would not write it down as a recommended element because it's still high. And then there's of course a risk that it's on the plant and not in the plant, but it's better than nothing. But that's the practical approach everybody uses in apples and pears for 10 years with tissue test because it's the same plant.
Right.
Yeah.
You don't want us washing the leaves.
Yeah, washing won't work. I tried it so often, and then you wash off your manganese, but you wash out your potassium too. You think you got a potassium deficiency, but it is not true because you wash them out, you know? Yeah. It's kind of hard. I told you with the bags around it, and then look at the difference between the treated one and the non-treated one, and then if you look at the non-treated one compared to 2 weeks ago, the numbers should go up, right? Because you got to treat the crop. That's a possibility. Scientific, you can prove it. But it costs you twice the samples. I'm okay with it, but it costs you double the money too. So I should not do it. But that's a way to really figure it out if necessary in trials. Is that okay?
If we wash our leaves before we send it, do we have to be careful
distilled water.
Yeah, you should not wash it.
Should not
No,
wash.
no, because there are more disadvantages from nutrients which you leach out by washing than an advantage from the ones you, like foliar sprays, get off.
So if they're dirty, don't line them.
Sorry?
If they're dirty from the dirt or the soil.
Yeah, what we do is with the tissue, with distilled water, not a wet tissue, but like a little bit damp, and then you can clean them, but not with water in a bucket and, dry them out and put them in the oven. And, don't do it. But with tissue, slightly cleaning them, perfect. Yes, please. Better than something else. But not real water washing and wet and try to clean them and then the mold in the bag and you don't want it. But a little bit cleaning, yes, appreciate it.
How long after the foliar application are the nutrients in the leaves?
Depends on the quality of the foliar. It can be next hour. Quick, normally. Yeah. So I hand over there. Yeah.
So, like with your hydroponics, there's a rage on YouTube with like hydroponics, and I feel like compost is like if you catch your urine and you want to use urea, it was told like vinegar, like a splash of vinegar, and it keeps the ammonia from, the nitrate from
Yes.
acid.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know, like that. I want to understand that process, like.
Yeah, it's on the internet. It's very,
No, the vinegar part isn't.
Oh.
But like then.
It's a pH thing.
Like
It's a pH thing. Vinegar is 2 pH of 2 or something or 1, and you put the pH down, and the nitrate to ammonia is only possible at pH of 7+. So if you keep the pH down, it stays nitrate.
And so then it's still not a good form of nitrate though.
No. But if ammonia is not that good either. It's still no protein. But if you apply right at the amount the crop needs, and you got the sulfur, the manganese, and the molybdenum, okay, you got your conversion to protein, and you're okay. You can just apply nitrates. Don't over apply.
So can you quickly tell us protein nitrates like fish emulsion and like what else we could use?
Can you help me out, John? Where's John? Protein sources for fertilizer in your country? Yeah. I know what's available.
Yeah, there's a number of sources. There's now a dry granular powder with an analysis of 1300 that is extracted from soybean meal. It's coming from a company out of California called, I'll have it here in a second, not Better Grow. Better Nutrients, perhaps? I think it might be Better Nutrients. And then there's a couple of liquids, Liquid 700 coming from 2 different companies that are just an amino acid blend, and we're actually looking at potentially distributing some of those because they're not readily available at this point. So at AEA, we're intending on having some of those Liquid 700s available for farmers to use. So I think those are the best answers that I have right now. Yeah. Yes.
We've had talk about are there any specific reasons for that besides sugars?
Yeah. So then we take the sample in the morning. Yeah. Yeah. Why are we taking the sample in the morning? If your sample dehydrates during the morning, so after 2 hours after sunrise, the water will go out, and a plant normally has like a leaf has 90% water, 10% dry matter. So if you lose 10% water during the morning and 10% during the afternoon, you lose 20% water or 90%. It's about water. So your numbers will go up with the water. So potassium at 5,000 will be 6,500. And then you're toxic, although you're not toxic at all, it's just a measuring thing. So yes, it will change all the numbers, percentage wise.
Our trouble was if we got cold weather, cold nights in August, sometimes we have heavy dew yet. And I prefer not to go out.
Yeah, yeah. If the dew is off and the sunshine is not too strict on it at that moment, it's not a problem at all. It's more summer thing and not a fall thing.
You take a sap, collect the leaves, you could put it in the refrigerator and store it for a day or two, or would you just put it in a nice cool area?
Before you send it?
Like if you know that the weather's gonna be bad the next day or something.
Oh, okay, yeah.
You wanna store the test until like 2 days.
Yeah, I would not do it because it takes 3 days with the transport too, so it's 5 days and get a little bit long. But I can imagine 1 day would be acceptable if the weather's perfect compared to tomorrow.
If I would take it one morning and store it overnight for the next day to get it.
Yeah, that's no problem.
Put it in the fridge or how do we?
Yeah, fridge, yeah, cold.
Definitely
Cold and
refrigerated.
hot.
Definitely refrigerated.
And with this vacuum sealed bag, so you stop evaporation of the leaves.
All right, so I think we're going to conclude the discussion here. I want to say thank you for all of you for coming. And Jord, thank you for coming and for sharing your information with us the last couple of days. We really appreciate it. And we look forward to having you back at some point. So safe travels back. Thank you all of you. Have a great growing season.
Thank you very much for a nice group of work. Thanks. If anybody has a question, you can come all you around.
John, quick question here.